We are finally to the beginning of the offseason and turning our attention to the upcoming NFL draft that takes place at the end of April. I am already starting to evaluate the prospects. So if you love the offseason and are a dynasty player, anything like that, this video is absolutely for you. While this isn't going to be like a full deep dive, I am going to go through the wide receivers, running backs, and likely the quarterback slash tight ends and talk about like the early look, how they look analytically, and what are my early thoughts on them. If I've watched film on them, I'll give you kind of a sneak peek before I do my top 10 list like later on in the offseason. But let's get into the 2026 wide receiver prospects, man. All right, starting it off with a bang here. If you know anything about these prospects or you've been paying attention to college football at all this season, you probably know the name Mekhi Lemon. USC wide receiver, he was the winner of the Biletnikoff, which is basically the best wide receiver in the country, and it's voted on every year. The other two finalists were Jeremiah Smith, who you probably know who he is, probably the best player in college football, and Skylar Bell, who we'll talk about a little bit later. A little bit of a sneaky prospect under the radar, but previous winners of this award, though, pretty impressive list. The last 6 to 7 years, you got Travis Hunter, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jalen Hyatt, Jordan Addison, Devontae Smith, Jamar Chase, tons of impressive names. A lot of guys that you're very familiar who play on Sundays. And yeah, Mekhi Lemon's a lot of people's wide receiver one. I'm not going to spoil anything, but for my eventual top 10 list, but he is absolutely going to be up there. He gives you a lot to be excited about. Yards per out run, first downs per out run, targets per out run, does all his best work after the catch, like an all green across the board here. If you look at his numbers, he's going to likely profile as more of a slot wide receiver in the NFL, but we all know how good these archetypes are in this day and age. He's a little bit on the smaller side. I believe he's like 5'10", 5'11". That's what he's listed at on the USC website and on PFF. But you never know with these with what these colleges list them at because they always give a guy an extra inch or two. Sometimes they measure in at the weight or the height that they're going to measure in at the combine, but sometimes they lie about it. They try to skew it a little bit, but yeah, he kind of looks more like the JSN Amon-Ra, even a little Puka type, which Puka plays a little more outside. He's a lot bigger, but kind of this profile where he's going to play in the slot. He's going to play the Z. But yeah, he's pretty much a lock for round one, I think, in my opinion. I think in a lot of other people's opinions too. A lot of people love him. A lot of people's favorite wide receiver one, but going to be really, really curious where his landing spot is. And I'm going to be paying attention to it heavily just based on, how they're going to, how they're going to deploy him, how they're going to utilize him in their offense. But a fun prospect that I think a lot of people can get excited about for sure. Next guy here, Denzel Boston, another University of Washington wide receiver, joins this, top prospects list for this year. We've seen kind of a mixed bag out of UW recently with Rome Odunze. Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, a lot of pretty good. I know Rome Odunze hasn't had the greatest start to his NFL career, but I think he's going to be a pretty darn good player in the NFL for his entirety of his career. It's best not to helmet scout, though. I know you look at Jalen Polk, you hear Jalen McMillan, who's had a pretty decent start to his career, but Jalen Polk's the one that sticks out the most, and you haven't really had a ton of Washington wide receivers that would have been like studs in the NFL. I helmet scout sometimes too. Trust me, we're all guilty of it. We've had guys that hurt us in the past, and I'm sure Jalen Polk is a guy that has hurt you for sure. I mean, he was an early second round pick for the Patriots, and he has pretty much done nothing. He's not even on the Saints anymore. Or he's not even on the Patriots anymore. He's actually on the Saints. So I am early on in the process though of watching Boston, so I haven't really gotten like a true picture of how I feel. I will say this though. He isn't quite the type prospect that Odunze was, but he definitely is way closer to him than he is like someone like Jalen Polk or even McMillan, in my opinion. I think he's way more polished. He's just better. He operates a lot downfield. He's like a 14.4 ADOT, which is crazy for a guy who, I think probably does his best work across the middle. We'll talk about that more in the top 10 video, but he looks and plays with all of his 6'4" frame. He's 6'4". I believe he's 200 or a little over 200 pounds. Super strong, moves incredibly well. Just a guy who's built for the NFL. I know people are going to probably comp him to Keon Coleman, guys like that. A lot of guys that just are big, can't get open. I don't think he falls in that category, to be honest. I can imagine Boston being a pretty polarizing prospect, though, kind of like Keon Coleman was, but I don't think he's Keon Coleman, so I wouldn't just throw that tag on him right away. Overall, though, I like Boston. I think he's going to be a fun guy and probably a fringe first-round guy when the draft comes around. I'm going to try not to get too excited about this next one, but we indeed have another Ohio State wide receiver. We all know how great they have turned out recently. Jason, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Emeka Egbuka, like what we just saw him do this past season for like the first half. Although, Marvin Harrison Jr. has been slightly disappointing. He was the 4th overall pick in the draft, a really, really highly touted prospect who I think is going to have a good NFL career. He's going to be a very good player. I don't even think he's reached the ceiling yet. Carnell Tate, in my opinion, is no different than any of these guys. He is someone you should be very, very excited about. Great size, 6'3", 195. really fast. I've heard people say that he isn't as fast. I would tend to disagree, but man, he can burn. He operates primarily downfield, 14.6 ADOT, impressive numbers. Someone who played opposite of probably the best player in college football, so maybe that's like a some people say he's facing the number two corner all the time. He's not, he's facing number one or he's facing one-on-one coverage all the time. They're not as worried about him. But if you watch the film at all and you look at the numbers from this year, they don't lie. He's a really good player. True junior, impressive skills, can run routes. I won't spoil too much, but I think he'll be an early first round pick and a first rounder in the NFL draft for sure. Definitely an early first round rookie pick, in my opinion, that probably goes maybe top 10 in the NFL draft. Maybe we'll have to see how desperate teams get and how much they're willing to reach on him. But again, I don't want to spoil anything, but he's going to be up there for my rankings. I love Carnell Tate. He has the biggest ceiling of anyone, in my opinion. I don't really think it's close. You'll be hearing, all about him from me this offseason, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse. Carnell Tate is great. You should love him. I think everybody should love him, but, we'll see how people feel about him a couple of months from now. Another great prospect, Jordan Tyson, wide receiver out of Arizona State. Back-to-back fantastic prospects here, already viewed as like a top 10 to 15 pick in this upcoming draft. Pretty good size. I believe he's like 6'2", around 200 pounds. Numbers were a little bit down this past year. He when he really broke out last year in 2024. This season and honestly his entire college career has been riddled with injury. So that's something to know. He's torn his ACL. He's had soft tissue injuries. He had like a hamstring problem this year. He also broke his collarbone in 2024, like right before the Big 12 championship and right before they played Texas in the college football playoff. This is like absolutely the biggest concern when it comes to Tyson. Other than that, though, as long as he can stay healthy, he will be a team that, teams are going to draft in the top 15. And yeah, I just think he's going to be a good wide receiver in the NFL. He just needs to stay healthy. I think that you're injury prone until you're not. I think that Tyson's going to be just fine. He has all the talent in the world. The guy can separate. He wins at all three levels of the field and pretty much can run any route on the route tree. He leaves a little bit left to be desired after the catch. He has like pretty low. He's in the red on both yak per reception and missed tackles force per reception. I believe he's below 10%. But yeah, I will be super high on him, and he'll be probably in the conversation for wide receiver one for me in this class. Jordan Tyson is great. Omar Cooper Jr. Let's talk about one of the pair of Indiana wide receivers. They are currently still playing. I believe they play tonight versus Oregon. Going to be a great game. I'm super excited about it. We'll see how that goes. I think that Indiana is probably the favorite, but the Indiana's taken the college football college football season by storm this year. They produced the Heisman Trophy winner, and they had two pretty good wide receivers on offense. And Fernando Mendoza had two pretty good options to throw to. He's probably the lesser of the two names if you ask most people. True junior, under the radar for some, but man, this guy can play. Nightmare after the catch, just a bowling ball. This gets like a little bit overused every year. You see like at least one or two guys get like the Debo type comp. I think he's more of a route runner than Debo. I think he's twitchier than Debo. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I mean, has had an incredible career. I think he has a potential to be someone like Debo, especially after the catch when he gets the ball in his hands. He's one of my personal prospects. I have gotten to watch Omar Cooper. I have finished my evaluation on him. Yeah, he's good. We'll talk more about him when the top 10 video comes out, but he had probably the catch of the year versus Penn State to win the game. If you haven't seen that play, it's ridiculous. I'm sure it'll be played all year as we come draft time. You'll see that catch, but his underlying metrics check out too. 2.69 yards per route run, 12.3% first downs per route run, good targets per route run, almost 40% missed tackles forced per reception. Ridiculous. 7.1 yak per reception. Just everything checks out for me, especially a guy who can do it after the catch. You love to look for that. Love to look for guys who can create after the catch. I know that he commanded some pretty good volume too. 25% targets per route run is good. I am curious though if he declares. He has not declared yet at this moment. He still has some time to decide because I think he gets an extension depending on if Indiana goes to the national championship or not. But this guy will be one to watch. Absolutely. A guy I'm super high on. And if you haven't looked into him, you absolutely should. Okay. The other Indiana wide receiver, Elijah Surratt. Really an impressive journey for Surratt. I want to talk about that a little bit. He started at St. Francis. He went on to play at James Madison JMU for a year before he transferred with Curt Cignetti, who went to Indiana. I believe Curt Cignetti's only been in Indiana for 2 years. Turned that program around, but he brought Elijah Surratt with him. Clearly a hard worker. He has improved every season statistically, analytically. I think he's a prospect that's almost a lock to go on day 2, if not day 1. I don't know if a team's going to pick him in the first round. I don't think he's a first-round talent, but I think, it's hard to argue with the run that it made in the college football playoff. I think that's going to be a huge part of his draft evaluation is how good he was. They're currently undefeated. He'll be a popular name when the draft comes around for sure. I have watched extensive, like all 22 film of him. I have finished his evaluation, and I'll tell you, there's going to be a big divide on who people think is better. I think they're both good players. I think I have my opinions on who I like more. I won't spoil that, but it's good to know how different they are. Surratt plays mostly X and is on the outside, while Omar Cooper's like sticks mainly in the slot. I think they both can play. I think Surratt can play inside for sure. He does a lot of good work in on these short area routes, and Omar Cooper can absolutely play on the outside. From what I've seen, I'm not a draft expert or an evaluating expert, but from what I've seen, I think that they can both do what each other does, and they can both be moved around the formation. I am excited to get my insight on who I prefer, and will like be leaning more towards dynasty. I think that landing spot will be heavily reliant on that, but both project solid for the NFL. Surratt will almost for sure come out this year. I don't think he's going to be returning. He's a little bit of an older prospect, but his numbers, skills, he progresses every year. I think he's going to be a hot commodity. Yeah, for teams in the NFL. I think guys in the dynasty community are going to love him too, so look out for him as well. KC Concepcion, probably the one prospect that I would consider a my guy of this class. Um, it feels wrong considering he is a Texas A&M Aggie, but I cannot lie. This is my type of receiver. Without giving away too much, he does literally everything you want from a modern day wide receiver. He separates. He runs pretty much the full route tree, or he can run the full route tree. He's great speed, elite quickness, great after the catch, green across the board. I love KC Concepcion. I think he is phenomenal. I think he's going to be a first round pick. I am, if you want to call it flag planting, sure. I think he's already been mocked in first round, so I'm not really predicting too much, but he ranks at the top of the list in almost every analytical category, all green across the board, like I said, and he's playing against SEC competition weekly. It was good to see him come over from NC State, which he transferred from, to A&M, and just take it to a next level. He had kind of a down sophomore year. He broke out big his freshman year at NC State, and it's good to see him just like pretty much put together a full resume on display for the NFL draft for evaluators. Yeah, I mean, I will not stop myself there because I'll stop myself a little bit there, is what I'll say, because I want to go more in depth on his game a little bit later. But he's a fantastic prospect in my eyes, and someone I'm, considering he goes on night one. I think he's like a Lad McConkey type guy, like a guy that people are going to knock because he's not the biggest guy in the world. I believe he's a little bit lighter. I think he's below 6 foot, but he does everything you want from these guys. Like, what Malik Neighbors does, just separates with the best of them, and a guy I'm going to love throughout this entire draft process for sure. Although I'm a Longhorn, it hurts, but KC Concepcion is really, really good. An Alabama wide receiver jumps in here, Jeremy Bernard. He was like a hot name during the early to middle portion of the season, kind of tailed off towards the end in his production, as we are seeing now. Overall, a solid season though. Honestly, like 862 yards, 7 touchdowns. He had over 100 targets. Really solid when you look at it, but I haven't gotten to watch Bernard. He's one of the guys I'm looking to get around to very soon. His underlying metrics aren't exactly something you love to see. Only a 1.7 yards per route run. It isn't bad, but a little bit mediocre. 20.1 targets per route run. Considering he got 100 plus targets, though, this is kind of low. He ran a ton of routes. I believe he ran like 500 plus routes. I think the most on the entire Bama team. This is exactly why metrics matter, in my opinion. If you take a look, he ran a ton of routes, but he wasn't really an elite target earner despite the high targets. So that is exactly why I think that targets per route run is so important, to give you a little bit more context if you didn't watch the film, give you something to look out for. This metric here, though, worries me the most. 8.3 first downs per route run. Not good at all. He's in the red, and in the dark red too. This by no means doesn't mean he's going to be like a bad player in the NFL. I think he's going to be good in the NFL, to be honest, but not a great indication early on of him being like a true difference maker, possibly. But like I said, I don't want to put a ceiling on these guys too quick. Let's talk about what he does well though, because dude, after the catch, almost 27% missed tackles forced per reception, 6.2 yak per reception. You love that because he's at the top of the board in a lot of those. You love to see what guys can do in space once they catch the ball. If guys can create after space and just rack up those fantasy points and rack up just yards for a team, keep drives going, extend drives, that's very valuable. And I think Jeremy Bernard's probably going to be like a good wide receiver too in the NFL. He's a decent projection, in my opinion. I haven't watched him yet, of course, but productive Bama wide receiver. I think he's already projected like day 2, probably second, third round for sure. Not sure if he becomes a wide receiver one, but who knows? I could be totally wrong, when we see his career get started and what he does right when he gets to the NFL. Let's talk about another popular name, Chris Brazzell, Tennessee wide receiver, big breakout in 2025. 88 targets, 61 catches, just over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns. Pretty good analytically. 6'5". He's right at 200 pounds. He's a slightly slimmer frame, but big down the field guy, big deep threat, 15 and a half ADOT. But you watch the Tennessee offense, you've watched Tennessee at all this year, you've seen kind of what he's done to teams. I think he destroyed Georgia at one point this year. But this Tennessee offense worries me. It gets me a little skeptical on the hype that he's getting. They are, the Tennessee offense is very gimmicky, not translatable to the NFL. I don't remember the last Tennessee wide receiver that really translated well. I think Cedric Tillman's okay, but Jalen Hyatt, he won the Biletnikoff off this offense with, I forgot who the quarterback was, but yeah, drafted in the third round by the Giants. Has never really turned out to be anything in the NFL. Same thing kind of can be said for Cedric Tillman. He's really not done anything with the Browns, but like a small stretch with them. We shall see, though. I'm curious kind of where he goes and what NFL teams think of him. Incredibly productive, though. Highlights are cool. I watched the All-22, taking a closer look, and I won't spoil anything, but he's going to be polarizing for sure. I have a hard time with this Tennessee offense and how I just don't know what to do with them because they don't have a great track record in that offense. If you ever watch all 22 of them, it's unbearable. It's hard to watch. Yeah, good SEC team, but hard to watch on film and hard to evaluate. Skyler Bell. Like I talked about earlier, I think the first guy, Makai Lemon, he was a finalist with him. Intriguing prospect that I haven't really gotten to watch yet. Limited tape on him. He went to UConn. He had over 100 catches, 102 catches, 140 targets, almost 1,300 yards. He dominated at UConn. I have one holdup with him, though, is that he's a fifth-year guy. He stayed in college for quite a while. He never really dominated, at average at best competition at UConn, probably below average competition. He has the highest yards per route run, though. Highest targets per route run of the group. 12.3 first downs per route run is solid as well. Not really great after the catch. That's what I mean. His 12.7 missed tackles forced per reception. He's not, making guys miss and not doing a ton after the catch. That's why I think that 8.2 yak per reception for him can kind of look skewed. It looks weird because you're like, oh, he's good after the catch or he isn't. So yeah, that can kind of tell you a little bit of the story. I haven't watched him yet, so I don't want to make any, assumptions based on something that I haven't seen. I am curious, though, when I do watch the tape, if he's going to be a slot-only projection in the NFL. That is something I look for. Not that it limits guys, because we love the slot guys they can be high-volume guys, like, Amon-Ra is the poster boy. He's been probably the most consistent wide receiver in the NFL the last 3-4 years. I envision this being a lot of people's sleeper, though. Kind of reminiscent to, like, Kyle Williams and Jack Bech, how they were viewed in the last year's class. I am excited to start my evaluation and, just look into, like, what he looks like, because his numbers look great. His production looks great. Finals for the Biletnikoff, so we will see about Skyler Bell, but I think a lot of people can get excited about him, and we'll see what his projection looks like in the draft in the coming months. A guy I have watched, Antonio Williams, Clemson wide receiver, was a lot bigger name coming into 2024, but injuries, Clemson falling off a cliff completely as a contender is, kind of made him fall under the radar quite a bit. He was also, like I mentioned, he was hurt quite a bit this season, missed a ton of games. A 4-year guy, but he's been pretty much consistent, steady every single year. His numbers have been like almost identical, like weirdly enough, in pretty much every single one of his years he's been fully healthy. But, all the way back to his true freshman season, he was good as a true freshman. So that's pretty good at a big program like Clemson. Never truly dominated at the college level, though, and he's in a weaker conference at the ACC. But there's something that I think a lot of people miss with context with him. He was playing next to and competing for targets with two big prospects for 2027, in my opinion. Bryant Wesco Jr., TJ Moore. If you don't know who they are, they will be some of the bigger names in a loaded 2027 class. I think at least one of them goes first round, maybe both of them. I don't think so, but Bryant Wesco Jr. is really, really good. Just some names to look at and just be like, oh, why did Antonio Williams do this much? Well, he had two guys there that were just as productive. And, Antonio Williams' production was pretty good too. 2.27 yards per route run, 11.2 first downs per route run, good. 27% targets per route run, which is good. That means he's commanding targets. He's just not the greatest after the catch. Although I have watched him, he is pretty good after the catch. He does some good stuff. Clemson offense so is a mess. I give stuff like guys staying a lot later and guys competing for targets with other players who are going to project high in future NFL drafts or future prospects. I give that a lot more merit. So it's something that I'm not going to be talking Antonio Williams for. But I think he's probably going to be a mostly slot player. I do think he has versatility though to do more based on what I saw in his film. And if you look at his years, he played a lot of slot this year, I believe 93%, but he played more in the 50 to 60% like the 2 year or two of his other years in college. So I don't know what's going on there. He is someone I envision probably being a late second, like a third round pick in the NFL draft come April, and someone I think people should be excited about. Kobe Lane. Alrighty. I'm just gonna be straight up. I don't know how I feel about him. I don't know if I'm gonna like him. I have this weird feeling that I may not. It could go one way or the other. I'm either gonna really like him or I'm not going to. That's just my initial opinion. He's the other wide receiver for UFC. He played next to Makai Lemon. Very, very different wide receiver than Makai Lemon. Size, play style, speed, production, you know, totally different guys. I believe that Jacoby Lane's like almost six. I believe he's 6'4", maybe 6'3". I can't remember, but big guy. Um, Pretty good after the catch. I think 25% or coming up on 25% missed tackles forced per reception. He has some highlight reel catches, like ridiculous athleticism, like ridiculous body control type catches, and that is something you love to see. Body control plays a lot into what I look at on film and how good these guys can, just how they operate when they are going across the field, how they operate in and out of routes, just stuff like that. And he has some pretty good body control, ridiculous catches. Go watch his highlights if you haven't. They're pretty crazy, but I just heard whispers that he struggles with some stuff and isn't complete, but then again, who really is at the college level at this point? I just need to watch the film and make an opinion for myself. I think if you liked Lane early in the process, then you were probably excited that he declared. It shocked me. Honestly, it shocked me that he decided to come out. He must have gotten, good word from the NFL scouts that he would go decently high because, I just didn't think that he would come out. I think he'd probably go back because Makai Lemon was going to declare for the draft and he would be the number one at USC. And their quarterback was returning as well. So that was something it was weird to see, but interesting prospect. And I think it's going to be another polarizing one for a lot of people, especially film and analytics guys. Chase Roberts, BYU wide receiver in this class. He's a 5-year guy, a little bit on the older side. However, I really liked Roberts when I watched him. I have finished evaluating him, which is weird because I didn't think I would get to him first out of all people. Without spoiling too much, I think he's going to be a good player in the NFL, a really solid one, average at the very least. Great size speed combo. He can play on the outside. He's 6'4". He's built well. He's an older guy too, but he can get open. I think he's going to be a good player in the NFL. He reminds me a lot of a mix between Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman. A lot of Pierce's ability to beat defenses deep over the top, but a little bit worse prospect than Pittman when he was coming in, and definitely not as fast as Alec Pierce. Pierce was a burner, man. He ran below 4.4s, I believe, but I think he's like a good combo of these guys. He's not going to do a lot after the catch at all, which is the first thing that sticks out. Not much of a factor there. Missed tackles forced and reception in the dark red. Easily his biggest weakness. More of a possession guy, but has some speed there too. I'm curious if a team takes a chance on him like they did Jack Besh, but I don't think that I think he may go like third round, early day 3, like fourth round at the very latest. I think he's a solid prospect that teams are going to like just based on what he can do to defenses, stretch a team vertically, and he can go across the middle well. And he's a big body. Chris Bell. Unfortunately, someone that was at a lot of people's boards, at the top of a lot of people's boards, towards ACL and like one of the last games of the seasons. It was so brutal. Was like a fringe first rounder in a lot of mocks and a player a lot of scouts were high on. I got to watch him a little bit. He's good. I think he's going to be a probably good NFL player. Just a matter of how quick, if his medicals check out and how quick he can get back from this injury. I think he's for sure going to drop in the draft. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he doesn't. I don't think a team's going to take him first round, though. Still an interesting prospect nonetheless. And I think some people might forget about him just because he is injured. He'll probably be a firm day 2 pick, though. Like I said, if the medicals check out, I think he'll be just fine. If you have seen Chris Bell, though, you know that he is a unit. 6'2", 220. Kind of a freak athlete that I think would probably tested really well at the combine. He's pretty fast for his size, but he takes him a second to get going. To really get up to full speed. He doesn't have super quick and acceleration or first step. 104 targets though on the year, 72 catches, 917 yards, 6 touchdowns. All pretty good numbers across the board, except for after the catch, which I thought he would be better. Just don't forget about Chris Bell though. I think he's going to be, he might give you a nice discount, and due to him being injured, a lot of people are going to just be out on him and just really not going to worry about him. Out of sight, out of mind at that point. So I think Chris Bell's an interesting guy and someone you should not forget about. Brandon Thompson. Yeah, I have not watched any of this guy. I know that he was at Texas a long time ago, a transfer from Oklahoma as well. I know he's got a ton of speed though. A little bit of a smaller frame, 5'11", 170. So really thin frame now, but I haven't gotten around to him. I think kind of intrigued by this profile, just looking at his numbers initially, but he'll probably be a lower tier prospect. I bet he goes on probably day 4 just based on, the early talk of him, but you never know. His numbers were great for 2025. He had almost 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. Just didn't command a ton of volume, but then again, he's on a Mississippi State team that is not very good. Although they gave Texas a run for their money. But playing in the SEC schedule is always nice to see. He's playing against good competition. He's played at 2 big schools like Texas and Oklahoma. I think he played against a ton of guys who are going to be playing on Sunday, so it makes this tape a lot easier to really evaluate, and it's something that I'm going to be watching, or someone I'm going to be watching in the coming weeks here. Eric McAllister, TCU wide receiver, and man, oh man, dude, his numbers, if you look at him right now, they stick out. Haven't gotten around him at all either. He's another guy that has kind of showed up. I didn't know a ton about him because he was at TCU. TCU is not the biggest program at the moment, like they were a couple years ago, but pretty much all green. But what sticks out to me the most, 38% missed tackles forced per reception. My goodness, dude is incredible when he gets the ball in his hands. Electric, 7.9 yak per reception. I need to get to his film quick. I'm really excited. 119 targets on the year, almost 1,200 yards, 10 tutties. I love it all. He looks awesome, man. I don't know what he's going to look like on tape. I don't know what this TCU offense looks like in general, but the only holdup I have is, TCU wide receivers have scared me in the past. I don't want a helmet scout, like I said. Quentin Johnson, though, Jalen Rager, Jack Besh, who we still don't know about. I actually liked Jack Besh last year, so we'll kind of see how he turns out in the NFL. Savion Williams was also a third rounder that has done nothing this year. It just scares me a little bit. So I don't want to say anything, though. I'm going to be open-minded when I go into the film. But, I just don't remember any of these guys being this sound analytically than Eric McAllister is. So we will see come April what teams think of him and what I think of him on film. So, like I said, Big 12 competition is not what it used to be, but it's still, it's still pretty good. It's not the SEC or Big 10. Either way, I'm excited to get to McAllister. Zachariah Branch. He just declared for the NFL draft not too long ago after, I believe, Georgia lost in the college football playoff. This kind of surprised me, though. I'm surprised he declared he's a true junior. I thought he might go back to Georgia, but his numbers were good in 2025. I cannot lie. Look, all green across the board. Someone probably told him that he had a chance to go pretty high. I believe probably in my estimation, probably on day 2, as long as he tests well, medicals check out well. That's my first thought, though. A cool thing to know about Branch: he was the number 7 player in his recruiting class, the number 1 wide receiver, 5-star guy at his position. High pedigree recruit. He started at USC, where he played his first 2 years, though. He transferred to Georgia this past year. He really broke out this year, showed that he can, sustain that production in the SEC, and not in like a super slightly gimmicky offense in the Big Ten and USC. USC's kind of changed around a little bit, but the only red flags that I see before watching the All 22 film, and I haven't seen any film on him yet, but super low A dot, like 3.6 A dot, which is kind of sketchy. Screams manufactured touches. I saw him a little bit, some of his tape when he was at USC, but it looks like he's getting a lot of screens. Um, you know, Plays behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage, just not a whole ton of stuff downfield. The other thing is his size, 5'10", 180. But dude, if you see him on TV, if you see him in his highlights, he looks small. You just also never know what he's going to measure in at the combine when it comes around. Like I talked about with some of these guys, they lie about their height, their weight, whatever. Something to really watch with a lot of these guys in just in general when you look at the NFL draft, just see what they weigh in at, what they measure in at with their height and weight. A lot of teams lie about that type of stuff and just stretch it just a little bit. He's clearly, getting back to Branch, clearly an explosive, fast, twitchy athlete from what I've seen, though. Excited to get around to him. I don't know if Georgia was just using him like this because, that's just the best way to utilize him in their offense, or if he could, or if he's just a pretty limited player. I don't know. But, I think just based on the pedigree, I'm assuming he can do more. So I'm excited to get around and see, like, kind of what his role is going to be like in the NFL. Kevin Coleman Jr., Missouri wide receiver. I don't know a ton about him. I know that he transferred from Mississippi State last year. His numbers look great all around, like kind of on paper. Not the most production, but like looks like he's pretty efficient. I just don't know a ton about him. I'm going to be honest. I'm curious to see what his film looks like. Missouri doesn't really strike me as a team that runs a pro style offense. It's kind of a weird offense, and it doesn't really show a lot of the time what a wide receiver can do and what their potential is. Kind of like we saw with Luther Burden last year after having a huge freshman year. I assume he declares. I think he's a little bit of an older prospect, but you never know these days. I still haven't seen much on him though, if he has declared, if he hasn't, but we'll see if he gets like a Senior Bowl invite or something like that, a Shrine Bowl invite. Also curious to dive into these like under the radar big school wide receivers like he has been, because he's been at a couple of SEC schools, so they often get overlooked, and I'm wondering if Coleman kind of lands in that bucket. Isaiah Satania, I hope I'm saying that right. One of the two Oklahoma wide receivers. Quick note on him. He hasn't officially declared yet. I believe he's a junior, so he's a little bit of younger. He's a younger prospect. He can go back to school. He can go back for one or two more years. You never know these days. I wouldn't be surprised if he came out of the draft. He had a great year, 1,000 yards basically, over 100 targets, solid numbers across the board. But the only thing that scares me is the first downs per out run. It's below 9%. It's a little bit of a red flag, but everything else looks pretty good. I haven't watched him, but I've seen a couple of highlights of him, and I've seen him play against Texas. I've seen him play against a couple of other teams because Oklahoma was in the college football playoff. Dude, this guy is fast. Like track speed fast. I believe he has a track background, and he was like a big time track athlete. Don't quote me on that, but I think he's probably going to run, if not the fastest, one of the fastest when it comes, when the combine comes around. So, dude can burn. When he gets going, nobody is catching him. Looks to have good ability after the catch, too, which is really nice. Over 30% missed tackles forced per reception, almost an 8 yak per reception. Just looks to be really good. This production is pretty impressive considering John Mateer, the Oklahoma quarterback, missed a month of the season for OU, and they really could not create explosives or get the passing game going in the second half of the year. Just looked pretty limited, and Satania was good. So I'm intrigued by him. I'm excited to get into his tape. If he does declare, it'll be a guy that we look at to see if he's actually going to come out this year. Moving on to the last two guys here. Eric Singleton Jr., Auburn wide receiver. His numbers really aren't that great, and I'm surprised once again that he declared. You always kind of wonder if these guys are getting good or bad advice, but as we all know, he played at Auburn. The quarterback play at Auburn was not good. Kind of why Cam Coleman, like the 5-star guy that is in the transfer portal right now, why he got out of town over there. Also, probably the new coach has something to do with it. But I watched film on Singleton last year coming in. I play in like a Debbie Dynasty League. If you don't know what that is, it's like you basically draft college guys too, which is silly to think about, but that's how much of a sicko I am. I watched film on him when he was at Georgia Tech, the team he transferred from this past season. Really raw player that he can push a team vertically. I think he's raw. He's a raw route runner, but he's twitchy, man. He will run very fast at the combine. Almost sure of it. Like, there's no doubt. I think he's going to be one of the fastest wide receivers at the combine for sure, if not one of the fastest players at the combine. The only thing is, he got a ton of manufacturer stuff when he was at Georgia Tech, and it seems like that when he was at Auburn as well. I think I'm going to have to dive into his Auburn tape. Tons of screens, touch passes. He got a lot of handoffs when he was at Georgia Tech, like jet sweep type of thing, just trying to get him on the outside and in space. But yeah, I think a lot of teams or Georgia Tech and Auburn wanted to get him into space because of that speed, but I don't really think that's what he's best at. He goes down on first contact a lot. He can make a guy or two miss. He's got 26% missed tackles for per reception, so it's solid, and I want to respect that, but nothing game breaking. From what I'm seeing on tape, he goes down a lot on first contact, but he is a smaller guy. Can't really blame him there. I believe he's not on the shorter side, but definitely weight wise, he's a little thinner. Biggest concern will be, what will his role be in the NFL? Where is he going to operate on the field? Ton of guys like him, don't find big roles in the NFL, as we see with his ADOT as well. We'll see what he kind of looks like, and I'm just curious to see what other people think of him, because I wasn't crazy impressed with him, but I think he's going to be a guy that gets taken at least in the, early day 3, just based on his speed and his ability to stretch defenses. But once again, a raw player that I think is interesting nonetheless. Deion Burks. All right, last guy here, Deion Burks. He's the other Oklahoma wide receiver. Much less productive, and the analytics don't give you anything to be excited about. Not gonna lie, you look at it and you're like, ugh, like that is ugly. He's also a tiny bit of an older prospect. I think he's been in college for 5 years, maybe four at the very least, for sure. But the one thing I want to say here is that film guys talk about how much they love him, and that is exactly why he's here. Is exactly why I don't form my opinions just based on analytics. I think film is so important. It can really tell you a lot more, give you a lot more context, and just give you a lot more perspective on what these guys are going to be in the NFL, their situations, and we see it a lot more often these days. A lot of these guys who come in, they weren't crazy productive in college, but either the team didn't get the ball enough, you played in a bad offense, just in a weird situation. But I want to watch him, and I want to see if I'm seeing the same thing. I want to have him here though, just based on the love of the film bros out there in the film community. He will likely be someone that goes under the radar for sure, though, almost for sure, just based on his numbers. People are just going to turn away. 7% first downs per out run, 1.45 yards per out run. Not great. I think most of it is red except for his A dot, and even his A dot is not that high. So yeah, Deion Burks, we'll see about him, and I'm excited to dive into him for sure, just based on what people have said about him. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for your early look at the 2026 wide receiver prospects. Ton of interesting and fun names to watch as we kind of get started this offseason. So much more information we need to accumulate, though, whether it be watching film, the combines coming up, of course, hearing how different teams view these guys and what kind of where they may go on draft day. Going to be a super fun process and one I am just ready to lead the charge of. I love this time of year. Let me know in the comments if I missed anybody. I had to take a handful of guys off the list because they either announced that they were returning to school or people think that they're going to return. Also, a ton of these guys are still in the portal. A lot of the guys I didn't mention, and some of the guys maybe that are in this video may hit the portal. That thing is craziness right now. It's just something that played a factor into the guys that I had here and didn't have here. But anyways, I'm super excited to kick off the offseason with you guys and cannot wait to give you guys more content, whether it be NFL draft prospects, dynasty stuff. That's going to be a lot of what my content is going to be centered around, but I am going to sprinkle in the redraft stuff and kind of work to get you guys for next year. But of course, this dynasty stuff, NFL draft prospect stuff is going to be the majority of it, but it also leans into redraft because, of course, we all know how important rookies are. But yeah, I will keep it at that, and I will come out with a prospects video on the running backs here very, very soon. I hope you guys enjoy yourselves, though. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all soon.